Google's second generation of its Nest Hub has just landed, boasting a few new features such as sleep tracking and gestures, a similar if not familiar design, and a new lower price point than the model it replaces. But is it worth your hard-earned money, and how do these new features perform? Are they gimmicks, or are they actually useful? That's what we're going to find out today in this review of the Google Nest Hub 2. Full transparency, as always, this unit was purchased by me, it was not provided by Google, and I've been using it for just over 3 weeks as of the time of filming in order to get the full sleep tracking experience and to get a better feel for how the product works. Starting with the design of the new Nest Hub, if you've used the first generation device, then things will be very familiar. Up front you have a 7-inch touch display that sits angled on a fabric stand, giving you this sort of floating display sort of vibe. The display houses a Project Soli radar, which you may have heard of from the Google Pixel 4 and is used for sleep tracking and gestures, as well as an ultrasound and ambient light sensor. Round the back we have that fabric design that we've all come to know by now, available in 4 different colours, as well as a physical microphone mute switch, which is a welcome addition, a volume rocker button, and at the very bottom we have the power jack. For me personally, I do like this design. It's probably my favourite design language out of all of these smart displays out there, and I can see why they didn't change it too much. One thing I would have liked to have seen vastly improved is the bezels on this thing. I get that there needs to be some bezel in order to accommodate the sensor, but come on, the bezels on this thing are straight out of 2012. The other thing I would have liked to have seen is to colour match the bezels to the fabric that you're buying. The charcoal colour should have came with some black bezels, and the lighter colour could have came with this white bezel colour. On the inside we have a new 1.9 GHz ARM CPU with a machine learning hardware engine, presumably to help power the sleep tracking. There is also 3 far-field microphones in this year's model, which is an upgrade of the 2 in the previous model, a full range speaker, and we also have a temperature sensor inside this year's model, again in order to help with the sleep tracking. For connectivity, there is 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 5.0, a Thread radio which, like all the other Thread-enabled Google devices, is useless at the moment, and a Chromecast built in, meaning you can cast media straight to your Google Nest Hub. And this is all coming in at a brand new lower price point of $89.99 here in the UK or $99 in the US. And this is a significant price decrease over the previous model, which launched at $139.99 here in the UK. So I'm sure we're all glad to see a price decrease for once instead of the usual price increase. At first I was kind of disappointed to see that the display did not receive an upgrade this year. It's still that exact same 1024 by 600 display, which for 2021 is kind of meh. At the very least, I was expecting to see a 720p display, but reading specs on paper is all very well and good. How does it actually look in real life? And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that it is pretty decent and looks pretty good for what the display is. Of course, it goes without saying you can definitely pixel peep and pick flaws in it, and I wouldn't recommend it for any serious movie watching, and I hope nobody is doing that, but for its intended purpose it gets the job done. That doesn't mean I don't want the increased resolution next time Google. Speaking of the display, using the interface is a mostly pleasant experience. It's very well laid out, simple to use, and I personally love the way it looks. Most of the time when not in use, the display will show curated art photos from Google, or you can change this to be your own Google Photos slideshow, and you can wake the display up with a double tap or a swipe. Along the top you have a navigation bar which has a tab for your schedule, wellness, home control and media. The home control tab is obviously where you control all of your devices. All of the lights, media players and other devices connected to your Google Home will all be separated by their function or also by room. And this gives you quick access to the main functions you will need. The Media tab will have quick controls and access to all of your connected media services, such as Apple Music, Spotify and YouTube, allowing you to play back on the device directly, or control music that is currently playing on any of your other Google Home devices. A swipe up from the bottom will reveal some quick controls, including the settings menu, and a swipe from the left will take you back to the previous view or page you were looking at. I actually really do enjoy the simplicity of the interface and the layout, whilst having access to most of the controls you will need. I think it's really important for a device like this to have an easy to use and simple layout, and I think Google has done a great job of nailing that aspect, only to have tripped at the final hurdle. The biggest downside of this device for me is how much it lags and stutters when trying to navigate around. Swiping and scrolling around the display doesn't have that smooth, natural feel that we've come to expect. And even when you're swiping from screen to screen, it often causes the animations to hang and lag for a split second. Even when they aren't lagging and they aren't hanging up, there's just something about it that feels unnatural and doesn't feel like a smooth experience. It's certainly not a 60Hz or a 60 FPS experience that we've been used to getting from even the most budget phones these days. To be clear, I'm not expecting a phone-like experience, but just a consistent frame rate would be nice. It really reminds me of an Android tablet experience from 2012, although I guess given the display resolution that's kind of fitting. It's not even just when I use the display that it lags. Look how long it takes to respond and stutters when I use my voice. Hey girl, what's the weather like today? On the subject of voice, this year's model has 3 far-field microphones, which is a step up from the 2 of its predecessor, and on the whole I was actually pretty impressed with these. Not only was it pretty accurate, especially given my Scottish accent, which a lot of these devices often struggle with, but a couple of times it actually responded to me when I was down the stairs, and the funny thing about that is I was stood right next to a Nest Hub Mini. Admittedly, I don't live in a mansion, but it's still pretty impressive nonetheless. The speakers this year also receive an upgrade over the Gen 1, and whilst I don't have a Gen 1 for a side-by-side comparison, they do sound pretty good for the money, and they also get decently loud. Have a listen for yourself. You can also use the Nest Hub for making Google Duo calls, which will need to be audio only. As you may have noticed, I haven't mentioned anything about a camera, which on the surface might seem to be a little disappointing, given that this is pretty much an ideal device for making video calls, but also the main competitor for this device, the Echo Show 8, does have a camera. However, we have to consider that one of the main selling points of this device is the sleep tracking, and so Google says it decided not to include a camera here for privacy reasons. Obviously, for the sleep tracking to work, this device has to be beside your bed, and so the inclusion of a camera would rightly so make a lot of people nervous about using this in their bedroom. Part of me wonders why they didn't include a physical switch with a camera cover on it like the Echo Show 8 does, but then again, at least there's no chance of forgetting to flick it over if you don't have one in the first place. And for me personally, I'm not a big video caller at all, as in I never make video calls, so I'm personally happy to not have that here in order to reduce the cost of the device, but I know a lot of people might miss that functionality. Alright, let's talk about that new main feature here, which is the sleep tracking, or as Google likes to call it, Sleep Sense. The Nest Hub is equipped with various sensors in order to help track your sleep, the main one being the Project Soli radar, which apparently allows it to track sub-millimeter movement. This is combined with an ultrasonic, ambient light and temperature sensor, as well as the use of the microphones in order to build a picture of what your sleep looks like. Sleep tracking is turned off by default, and you need to go through and accept a lot of privacy prompts in order to turn it on, which I did appreciate. You can also turn on sleep tracking but leave off the microphone portion of it, meaning that you can track your sleep, but it won't tell you about things like your breathing and also coughing during the night. Google says that all the information is processed locally on the device, although some anonymous sleep data is sent to the cloud. You can also delete any of the locally stored data from the device. After setting up the device on your bedside table and running through the calibration process, which has you lie down on your bed for a couple of minutes, sleep tracking should now be enabled. It will need about 2 weeks of data before it can give you sleep recommendations like when you should go to sleep and how many hours of sleep you need. But until that happens, you can ask things like, "How was my sleep last night?" which will give you a report of how your sleep was. How many hours you slept for, what time you fell asleep and woke up, and how restful or restless your sleep was. Or you can ask, how was my breathing last night, which gives you stats about your respiratory rate, coughing and snoring. This is all really simple to set up and it does work really well. The problem is it doesn't really give me enough information that people who actually like to track sleep really need, like how much of my sleep was light, deep or REM. To get this kind of information, you're going to need to wear something on your wrist. Something like a Fitbit, which coincidentally I have been wearing for a number of years. For example, the Nest Hub is completely oblivious that I've woken up at 5 AM when my girlfriend goes off to work, whereas my Fitbit tracks this easily. However, I do know that some people aren't keen on wearing things on their wrist when they go to sleep, so this is definitely a good alternative for those of you who still want to track sleep. There are a couple of other things that are a little bit meh about the sleep tracking. Like for example, it tells me that my sleep was restless just because I coughed once or snored for a total of 1 minute. And the coughing definitely isn't even me, and I'm not entirely sure that the snoring is either. And that's the problem with the Nest Hub, is that it can't track 2 people's sleep. It can only track 1 person. The elephant in the room is that this is currently a free preview, and it says on the website that this is free until next year, at which point it will presumably become a paid service as part of their acquisition of Fitbit, and it remains to be seen how much that will cost. One other use we've seen for the solely technology is gestures, which allow you to control things like media and alarms on the hub without ever touching it, except once again the software lets it down. We've seen videos with how cool Solly can be, with lots of different gestures for controlling volume, changing tracks as well as others, but when it comes to the Nest Hub, all you can currently do is play pause media and snooze and dismiss alarms. No volume control and no skipping tracks, which is weird because to snooze or dismiss an alarm you have to do a swipe gesture. You would have thought they would have been able to extend this to skipping music tracks, but no. A couple of other things that seem like missed opportunities are that this guy has a light sensor as well as a temperature sensor, and it obviously has a motion sensor with the radar technology, and it would have been cool to have seen all of these exposed as sensors in the Google Home app so that you could use them with your routines. But again, no sign of that either. So what's the verdict on the Google Nest Hub 2? I actually think it's a good hub and a good smart display, but just not for its intended use. I really enjoy using it as a display for smart home control because the interface is nice, well laid out and simple to use. It also performs well as a speaker and casual media consumption device, all for £40 less than its predecessor, and I think that makes it a great smart display, especially if you're in the Google Home ecosystem. I just personally don't think it's best served on your nightstand, but much more useful in a kitchen, living room or office setting. If you're wondering if you should upgrade over the Gen 1, I would probably save your money. There aren't too many things different here that would warrant an upgrade. However, if you're in the market for a new smart display, or you were going to buy the Gen 1 anyways, then the Nest Hub 2 should definitely get some thought. But what do you guys think about the Google Nest Hub 2? Were you thinking about picking one up, or perhaps you've got something different, maybe an Amazon Echo Show 8? Please do let me know in the comments down below. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon, and your support allows me to keep on buying the hardware to make videos just like this. Thank you to all my current Patreon supporters, your support is very much appreciated. Make sure to drop this video a like and get subscribed, and I will see you in the next one.